The coastal regions of Beleriand were wonders of the world that was. Sprawling white sandy shores stretched 150 leagues from Vinyamar to Barad Nimros, and it is here among the shoals and inlets emptying into the Great Sea that the Falathrim, the elves of the coast, made their homes. And it is upon these sanctuaries of elvendom in the literal regions of Middle-earth that the hammer of Morgoth shall fall the hardest. Behold, Tol In Alquar, the Isle of Swans, a map crafted with care and attention by Captain Rex, one of our testers. In defense of the Isle stand several thousand of everyone's favorite Thalassophiles, supported in their efforts by Team Rainbow Vomit. Warriors of the hidden city of Gondolin have issued forth from their mountain fastness to stand with their cousins against the inexorable advance of evil. Opposite the field are the usual suspects, Angband and Tolin Gaurhoth, led by Sauron, and his little butt-pinching valet, who I suspect strongly to be the true power behind the throne. And they'll be fighting alongside a host of Sindar from the Guarded Realm, who clearly took a wrong turn at Albuquerque and ended up under the sway of the Dark Lord. The black tide rises and threatens to drown the Falathrim in a sea of blood. Will Iluvatar's firstborn withstand the twin storms of treason and reckless apocalyptic fury sweeping down from the north? Well, I'll tell you right now. I mean, you'll need to watch the video. Seriously, I need the ad revenue to purchase my third seaside mansion. And so, let's have a peek at the Defending Armies. The first army I have here today is one of the Falathrim armies, or rather the only Falathrim army, being commanded by Captain Gervais, who is the creator of this map. He has brought himself some scouts of Eglores. One of the things to note about melee cavalry in the new patch is that they do function quite nicely as mobile infantry reserves. I think I said cavalry reserves in a previous video, but that was very much misspeak. They are fantastic at holding a line. You can throw them in alongside your infantry if you want to. You can use them as you do normal cavalry, or you can use them to hunt down other cavalry and occasionally monsters. They don't do terribly against elephants, but there are certainly better choices. Moving on now. Got some Marines of Brathambar, one of the new harassment javelin units. Unlike other harassment javelins, however, the Marines of Brathambar use an infantry template. So, they have larger numbers, and they are also better in close quarters. Just one of the nice little perks of being the Falathrim. And we're going to see several of these units on the field today. We've also got at least two of the Arankir Lim. These are heavily armored bodyguard tier units. They do only have 1 HP, however, as there are several different kinds of bodyguards in Silmarillion Total War. They are not universally a 2 HP unit. And we're going to see two of them on the field today. Have some Marines of Eglores. Now, this is the second type of javelin that I want to draw your attention to today, because you're going to see them in full swing throughout the replay. The Marines of Eglores are what I like to call a hard target javelin, as opposed to a harassment javelin, which I just spoke about. Their thing is burst damage up front, shorter range, and about half the ammunition of a harassment javelin. That being said, they can fulfill sort of a similar role, I suppose, in that you can prey on infantry with them, but it is kind of inefficient overkill, as the harassment javelins will do that just fine, and they are generally a cheaper unit. You want to save these for hitting those hard targets, generals, bodyguards, elephants, things like that. Sauron is definitely going to have to be on his toes today if he doesn't want to get sniped out. Also bringing some Warriors of Eglores here. These are medium, upper mid-tier line infantry. They do pretty well what you would expect. In behind them, we have some Rangers of Brathambar as well, a nice little supporting unit. 3 units of Nobles of Baelor, as there is quite a lot of funds to go around for the defenders here, being quite hideously outnumbered. So we're going to see 3 of the Nobles of Baelor on the field today. 3 of the Marksmen of Baelor as well, so a very strong heavy infantry corps, a lot more heavy troops than what you're normally going to see from the Falathrim, who tend to rely a little bit more on their light and medium infantry, but it is a defensive siege, so yeah, this is the kind of stuff you can expect to see. Next up, we have the Marinos of Erendil, who are a legendary company, sort of different take on the Warriors of Eglores. Now, obviously, if we pop back here, the Warriors of Eglores are a little bit larger. The Marinos of Erendil, however, do have a bonus versus elephants, being that they are sort of the crew of the ship of Erendil Vingalote, which I think I pronounced correctly. And so they are a lighter variant in terms of shield and armor, but they do have better melee defense, a little bit of extra damage, and of course they can hit elephant units a bit harder, which isn't something that the Falathrim generally have in spades. Of course they have the two-handed spears, and those can do great, but it's quite easy for elephants to avoid such units, so these guys give them a little bit more of a mobile anti-elephant option, and in addition they also have a very strong Inspire effect, one of the things that the Philothrim are well known for. Second company here of the Rangers of Berthombar, light archers, more marksmen, more Marines of Eglaras. I think we're going to see 3 of them in total today, and yeah, no, 3, maybe more than that, maybe like 4 or 5. Wow, there's certainly a lot of them on the field today. It's something that Angband in particular is going to want to be wary of. And we have another company over here of the Marines of Berthombar, some nice supporting units, and then to round off the whole build, we have the Arain Efedu, who are the personal bodyguard of Círdan himself. We will have Círdan in the mod as a generic general for the Philothrim eventually, or as an officer within the Arain Efedu, one of the two, but they are the personal companions of the Lord of the Havens himself, and he's coming out today to support his kin. Moving on now, go past the quote-unquote fleet here, and I have to say this is actually quite a creative use of assets. The idea here is obviously to create something resembling boats, so there is actually a fleet moored in the harbor here in support of the Philothrim. But let's move over here and take a look at the hidden city of Gondolin, which I think is the first time I've had an opportunity to show them off on my channel. The hidden city is being played by Steward of Dale, or Stewie if you prefer. He's brought some Spearmen of the Swallow here. These guys are a mid-tier, one of the few mid-tier picks that Gondolin actually has. They are a little bit more focused on being a support unit rather than a true skirmisher. The city of Gondolin does have true skirmishers, but they are very, very expensive. And they also don't have a lot of things like hand-thrown missiles and things like that. But the Spearmen of the Swallow, a nice little dual-role hybrid unit. They've got about 8 or so ammunition, 5, which is an average for an Elven Archer, good accuracy, and of course they are shielded and so can take a lot of punishment from range. In behind them we have the Lords of the Golden Flower, and they are going to be so essential in this fight because there are Balrogs and there are Uruloki on the field. Lords of the Golden Flower are one of the very few 3 HP close quarters units. They have decent enough armor. I think they've got about 9 or 10 or so massive melee defense pools and a ton of damage. In addition to that, they are also a monster hunting unit. They have +4 versus elephants instead of the average +2, which can make them very, very deadly indeed. And in addition to all of that, in order to specialize them further for their role as an anti-elephant, anti-large sort of monster, or monster hunting unit, they are relentless as well. So the AoE from an elephant type unit is not going to stagger them, and so they're just constantly trucking through, dealing damage, and that's something that you want to be really aware of when you're facing these units. The best thing you can do is to try and take them down from a distance. Over here we have some Armorers of the Hammer. I believe we've got at least 2 companies of the Armorers of the Hammer on the field today. I think they are upgraded as well, and they are an armor-piercing, not quite shock unit. They do have a slightly increased charge bonus, but they also are one of the few Gondolin units to be able to upgrade their armor. They can go from 12 to 14, making them extremely tanky, one of the tankiest units in the game. Fantastic looking model as well, done by Skyly, one of our team of modelers. Moving on over here, another creation of Skyly, we have the Axemen of the Pillar. Fantastic chaff grinding unit, is going to be absolutely essential when fighting against Angband today, and Tolin Gaudahoth as well. Axe units like this, especially elite axemen, do wonders at chewing up light, medium, and just generally mid-tier infantrymen. Out in front, we have one of the other mid-tier picks for the House of Gondolin, the Guardsmen of the Harp. You can use them as the core of your army, or as supporting units, or really whatever you want them to be used for. They've got a high cap, they're quite cheap, easy to put chevrons on, and cheap to upgrade on their attack as well. So it can quickly move from sort of a mid-line, mid-tier unit to the upper end, as you can give them upwards of about 10 attack for a relatively reasonable price tag. Got some more Guardsmen of the Harp over here as well. More Axemen of the Pillar, and then we come to one of the true archer units, the only true archer unit really within the house, or the hidden city of Gondolin. Those are the Marksmen of the Heavenly Arch. Now, unlike other high-tier archers, these guys actually have massive ammunition pools. Instead of the regular 12, they have 16, which puts them at about the same sort of longevity as a mid-tier archer. In order to balance that out, they do have a pretty serious price tag, and there are a little bit less of them in a unit than there is for your normal high tier archer, which generally clocks in at about 120. These guys are 100. They do, however, have some seriously substantial armor values, and you're going to note that, I'm sure, in the battle today. In behind them, we have the Shield Bearers of the Tower, using some custom animations that we ported into the mod from Europa Barbarorum. They will fight with that sort of overhand spear, but they are also very closely spaced together, which in practical terms gives them a sort of spear wall ability. They don't have the sort of like distance of a spear, like our regular spear wall units, but because so many of them are close together and the animations seem to allow them to attack at a greater distance, running into the front of them will be a little bit akin to running into the front of two-handed spears. Obviously they do less damage, but they do have a shield and heavy armor to boot. So kind of a cool unit there, very unique to the Gondolin faction. And then in behind them we have some Scouts of the Tree. These are light slingers, looking a little bit like Reptile or something from Mortal Kombat. I really love their look. And they're going to be using some custom sling animations, again, which we ported in from Europa Barbarorum, which is a fantastic mod, crewed by very talented people, so highly recommend you check it out. But the slingers are low damage, armor piercing missiles, but in addition, they are also a mid-tier light infantry unit that are armed with maces. So they're a unit straight out of the book, and they add just so much utility to the mid-tier Gondolin roster. There are some reasons I would say not to bring them, especially if you're facing off against like horse archers and you don't want to double down on your Marksmen of the Heavenly Arch. They do support each other quite well. But if you're not able to really support them with like good, strong ranged units, then say horse archers, for example, can really do a number on your slingers, and anybody who has played against them will know to focus them down. So really good unit, adds a lot of utility, but can be quite vulnerable. Over here it looks like we have a third company of the Armorers of the Hammer, and some more Scouts of the Tree, and I believe there is one single unit of cavalry and a single unit of the Champions of the Fountain as well, in addition to the Retainers of the King. So we do currently have Turgon's custom model in the game right now. You can see his ruby scepter there in his left hand, his staff of office, and then of course he's going to be wielding Glamdring, the foe hammer, the sword later wielded by Gandalf throughout his adventures and used to slay Durin's Bane. It's got a cool little crown there as well. Big thank you to Sin of the Dark Cloud, who provided us with this fantastic model. And he also did work here on the Retainers of the King. A really, really good looking unit and fitting for the bodyguards of the Monarch. Now I know he's got some cavalry around here too. I'll explain them in just a second. But we have... Oh, they're sinking into the ground. I wonder what's happening there. We have the Champions of the Fountain. These guys are a specialist two-handed shock unit. They have the missile deflect chance that was normally a trait exclusively of the Fingolfin faction, so they do have a minor deflection bonus from the front, sort of similar to the Swordmasters of Hoeth in Warhammer Total War. These guys are also relentless, so they are very, very strong, very good at taking down large units. Ecthelion himself, within the short story The Fall of Gondolin, killed many, many Balrogs. Obviously a different sort of take on Balrogs, but within the context of that story, he slew many of them, and that's the sort of concept that we used moving forward into this unit and designing them statistically. So they can be very good at hunting large units, blending up infantry, super scary unit, not something you want to underestimate, and they also do have a minor inspiration bonus as well. And I know the cav are around here. I think this is not them. But there is a unit of the Knights of the Golden Flower. They are a heavy lancer unit. Actually the only cavalry unit that Gondolin has at their disposal. And these are the people of Glorfindel, part of his house anyway. Glorfindel himself leads the Lords of the Golden Flower unit that I showed you earlier. But these guys are very, very good off the charge. They have an increased charge bonus. They also don't take the usual penalty against elephants that Lancer units tend to, and that's just to sort of reflect the prowess of their lord, being able to take down Balrogs, who within the context of our game files are considered to be elephants. Well, that is going to do it for the defenders here today. Let's go ahead and see what the attackers are bringing to the battle. Immediately across from the Gondolin limb, we have the Black Legion of Angband. They're going to be commanded by Eclipse 2500 today. He is bringing it's a little bit different than what you would normally see for Angband in a siege. He's actually leaning on a core of Reavers of Unfauglith, who are a medium infantry unit, a little bit more damage focused and less focused on their armor. They make excellent reserves for the formation fighting Iron Shods. You're going to see some of them on the field today without their armor upgrade, which is interesting. There's, I think, 2 units of the full halberdiers, and then there is also a detachment of them, so 100 or so halberdiers, more reavers of Angband here, more Iron Shod halberdiers. We've also got the Scourges of Gothmog on the field today, who are one of the only truly damaging non-monstrous or non-bodyguard infantry units for Angband. They focus a little bit more on their melee defense and their damage than they do on their armor, so they can be extremely vulnerable to missile fire from a distance. Horse archers, green elves in particular, make these guys a risky pick. But here today in a siege battle, assuming that they can be defended well, the Scourges of Gothmog, this legendary company, can be very, very good indeed. Also, I believe have 2 units of the Iron Drakes of Angband, the new fire units that have just recently been added in our most recently released patch. They are kind of an interesting unit conceptually. The big thing that they do well is punishing blobs of light infantry or exposed wings of medium infantry, and they don't do a ton to heavy infantry. Maybe they get, 3 or 4 kills per volley, but ultimately it's just not efficient to use them against heavy infantry because it doesn't do a whole lot. But against some of the lightly armored Philothrum on the field, or against the House of the Harp Guardsmen, these units can be very scary, especially moving into the late game when you run out of ways to shut them down. So, interesting to see how they perform in this battle. He's got some Bulldogs as well, and they're going to be the command corps for his army. Fantastic model here done by Castellan of Angmar, or Taurion, however you choose to know him. Very, very nice indeed. The Bulldogs are a multiple HP, heavily armored bodyguard. They cause fear. They have really good attack and damage stats. They're just sort of everything that you would expect from a fallen Maiar. Over here we have some Arbalists as well. I think there's 1, maybe 2 full companies of Arbalists. Really good unit to have in a siege. We got some Halberdiers. They're going to be pushing their way up through them. Next, we have the Uruloki, the bastard children of King Ghidorah. Unfortunately, they don't have wings. However, these are fire drakes from the lore, much along the lines of Glaurung, the father of all dragons. They're essentially a mobile artillery piece that's also very good at picking on blobs, light infantry, and so forth. It can be used in a fairly similar manner to the Iron Drakes, except that these guys can shoot their fiery payloads over the heads of the advancing legions of orcs, whereas the Iron Shods, or the Iron Drakes rather, need to have more direct line of sight. That's not something that really holds back the Uruloki, who are the real, genuine article, whereas the Iron Drakes are really more of a parody. And now, we have a new model here for the Valoralkar. This is obviously based on the Bloodthirster from the beginnings of the End Times mod, and it was worked on really hard by Skyly, and I'm really, really happy with how it turned out. The axe there in particular is meant to symbolize Gothmog, the Lord of Balrogs, who currently isn't like a general or anything, but when you pick a Balrog unit, you can occasionally get something that is intended to be his likeness, and that is this helmeted brute here with that massive fiery axe. And if you look at the other 2 units here, they don't quite have the same thing. So the face of evil right there. Obviously a Bloodthirster from the beginnings of the End Times mod, but I think it actually does fit quite nicely with a lot of artist depictions of Valoralkar. And obviously we've gone with the non-winged variant. I'm sure that'll be a controversial change for a lot of people, but there is, for those of you who are unaware, and this is some crazy ass nerd stuff that only Tolkien fanatics like myself would really care about, is that there is some debate whether or not Valoralkar or Balrogs had wings, or whether or not it's just flowery language and sort of metaphorical language used by the author. There's good arguments on both sides. Personally, I believe that they had wings, but we decided ultimately amongst ourselves to go with the non-winged, more brutish kind of traditional demon variant, and I think that they look damn cool. I think that's pretty well it for the Angband army, except, we have some stragglers back here, some Tormentors of the Iron Crown, one of the few genuine units of, quality for Angband. A little bit lower on the damage side of things, but they do have maces and therefore AP. So against some low skill but high armor units like, say, the Armorers of the Hammer of Wrath, then these guys can be particularly useful. And I think that's probably why they are brought today, to chunk through some of that heavy armor. Moving on over here, we have the Realm of Doriath being commanded by Lord of Belagost. He's got some Wardens of the Girdle here. These are light, unshielded axe units. Not a lot of ammunition, but they do have increased stats in melee as they use the infantry statistic, or stat template, instead of the skirmishers. Good for softening up enemy positions, and it looks like that's going to be what they're doing here today. Maybe trying to bait out some ammunition from the Marksmen of the Heavenly Arch up there on the wall, and yeah, that'll save the lives of some of his more important units later on in the battle. Have a Ballista here as well. Interesting pick, possibly to snipe out some counter-artillery from the defenders on the inside. We'll see how far it goes, but even if he misses every shot, he does still have half a unit here of Axe Guard of Region, which are a really nice unit. You're going to see a full company of them over here. Great at blending up chaff, as high-end axe units tend to be. Got some more Axe Guard here as well. Doriath particularly reliant on their axe units. A couple units of the Rangers of the Girdle as well. The only true skirmish-focused unit for Doriath is a detachment of Rangers. You can bring 2 of them, up to a total of 126, I believe, men in total. And yeah, Doriath is an up-close army, all about getting in your face and burying a hatchet between your eyes, so they don't really go in too much for the range combat, but as we saw with the Wardens of the Girdle and now with the Rangers of the Girdle here as well, they do have a few options so that they're not completely helpless in the face of armies, such as the Elves of Assyrian. And behind them we have the Tier'en Leisdanen, which people love to bring. I've seen them in like almost every single game that I've seen of Doriath in the last little while, but it's not always worth it to bring. That being said, in this particular matchup with all the heavy infantry on the field and the formation fighting units, this is absolutely the sort of situation you want to bring the Tier'en Leisdanen in. And just be aware that their AP missiles and the high mass behind them, ooh, some artillery coming in there in the background, about to squish probably some warriors in the back. But the high mass and the AP damage from the projectiles makes them very good at breaking up formations of pikes, halberds, two-handed spears, what have you. But if you're just going to bring them as an axe-throwing unit, then you should probably bring something cheaper. Doriath does have other options for it. But in this particular matchup, I think that they are perfectly placed. In behind, have some Warriors of Region here. I believe 4 full companies of them. Armor-piercing two-handed axemen. Very, very good. They do exactly what is advertised on the tin. They have high charge, high damage. Really not a unit that you want to take a direct charge from. Over here we have some Sword Host of Region. In the new patch, the Sword Host are one of the few units for Doriath that can actually upgrade their armor. Them and the Spear Host, along with the Kuthalim, now have the ability to upgrade once. It is a little bit more expensive, but it does give the Sword Host a little bit more of a niche, I think. Now they are a little bit more of a defensive-oriented unit, and that sort of contrasts with units like the Warriors and units like the Axe Guard. In behind, we've got some Kuthalim as well. And they're going to be serving as a general's bodyguard. You can see Thingol Greycloak himself, the Lord of Doriath, joining us on the field. Then over here we have the Donath en Mablung. So just a little cool tidbit. Both of these units are named for very prominent Doriath heroes. The Donath en Mablung, obviously, for Mablung of the Heavy Hand, who is one of the captains of the Guard of Doriath. And then we have the Kuthalim, who is sort of the captain of the... I can't remember their name. They're like the Outriders or the Rangers or the Border Guard of Doriath. Beleg Strongbow or Beleg Kuthalion, who was one of the companions of Turin, the Black Sword and a very tragic figure within the story of the Silmarillion. Moving on now to the third and final attacking army, we have the Dominion of Tolin Gaurhoth being played by Frodur Baggin. And I think he's a little bit newer, but it's actually nice to see a new face in the game today. He's got some Scarhide Trappers, I believe, to the tune of 2 or so units of them. They are a mid-range Javelin unit. I think they are considered a hard-to-target Javelin, so their ammunition is limited, but they do pack a serious punch, especially with those numbers. Got some Gijak Scout as Wolfguard here, sort of a more lighter equivalent to the Tormentors of Angband. They do also inspire and can be used to form sort of the core of your army. They're very, very nice unit, quite niche sometimes, But if you're bringing them to fight heavy infantry, then you can really not do a whole lot better if you want a sort of nice mix of offensive and defensive capabilities. Got some more Wolfguard here as well, some Chosen. I think we've got 2 companies of the Chosen on the field today. They're sort of the spear variant, I guess, of the Wolfguard. They've got a little bit higher melee defense and better shield value to boot in addition to their spear. More Trappers over here, those are the other 2 units. And got a Mangonel. I think I actually missed the Mangonel for the Angband army as well. There's 2 Mangonels on the field today. They've been changed a little bit. I'll talk about those changes in brief here. To bring them in line with the rest of our fire weaponry, they've lost the armor piercing and the ground burn, but they have been given a slightly longer fuse time on their projectile. So you do need to know how to space them, but that's just to help you hit targets at a longer range and to utilize the 400 or 450 or so range on this artillery piece and do so reliably. Also, when the projectile explodes, it releases about 22 or so small projectiles into a 90-degree cone in front of it. So it's a little bit more reliable to use, and if you get good shots with it, then damn can this thing do some damage. But it's a little bit less set and forget, I think, the way that the previous Mangonel was, and like I said, it's now in line with the philosophy of the rest of the fire units. So now you can sort of know what to expect, basically. We don't have that inconsistency anymore. I got some Scarhide Blood Drinkers here as well, 2 or 3 units of mid-tier shock troops, extremely cost-effective, and that's really what Told in Gauderhoth is all about, isn't it? Getting cost-effective trades with your infantry and using your cavalry well. That being said, not a lot of room for cavalry on the field today, and you're not going to see a ton of them as this is a siege battle. So Told in Gauderhoth going to lean real hard into their medium and heavy infantry corps. Got some Hishbukraz Hunters on the field today. A super cost-effective unit. Good numbers, good damage. They actually trade really well with a lot of mid-tier Elven archers, mostly due to their the large numbers that they can be fielded in. And back here we have the beating heart of corruption within the armies of Told in Gauderhoth, Sauron himself, the Lord of Wolves, and some Hishbukraz Ash Priests, who are a lesser species of Bulldog, who are just lesser fallen Maiar, forced to inhabit the shape of monstrous orc chieftains. These are slingers, but their AP damage is higher, and it also will immolate things. They've been gifted some tricksy traps by Sauron himself, and so their flame weaponry works a little bit differently than the rest of the flame weapons in the game. I think that's basically everything for Told in Gauderhoth. I don't think they have any hidden units or anything like that out here. No surprises waiting for us. And so, let's jump into the battle. Hope you guys enjoy it. And so, the game is going to open up with a few salvos here from the artillery batteries of Told in Gauderhoth. The new Mangonel is a little bit tricky to use, and I think we're going to see that here. Let's go ahead and turn things down just to about 0.8. You need to be aware of its spacing. So that big shot lobbed there, yes, because the Mangonel projectiles have a fuse time on them. It's between, I believe, 4.7 and 6.2 seconds, something very close to that. So you need to be aware that you have to have enough space to actually have your flame projectile detonate, but also, you know, not have it detonate too prematurely. So it's interesting. It's not quite the point-and-click massacre button that it was previously, which I'm quite happy with, but the implementation is still being worked on. That being said, Mangonel in this battle is going to do some ridiculous damage. Let's pop on over to the other frontier. That is going to be manned by Gondolin. Looks like some early damage here, probably from the Ballistae, I would think. Ooh, counterfire there from the Trebuchet. Not something you see every day when it comes to actually hitting infantry, but occasionally you do get lucky, and I've seen people peg generals with the Trebuchet, and then it basically has paid for itself right there. More shots flying overhead, hitting nobody in particular, and being aimed at no one in particular. But Gondolin is going to be staffing these 2 choke points here. So the central choke point and then the more western choke point. They will also be manning against Angband, and that's going to be a pretty tough fight for Angband. One of the things about Angband moving into the new patch is that the brute force option is still kind of there when you have the ability to flank people to make use of your numbers, but in this sort of Thermopylae-esque setting, it's actually going to be pretty hard for them to break through there, because they're going to have to fight the Elves of Gondolin 1-to-1, which is something that you generally want to try and avoid, if at all possible, especially when playing as one of the Orcish factions. Model to model, the Elves outstrip the Orcs by a serious amount. The big advantage to being an Orcish faction, obviously, is your numbers, but Angband is also going to have to rely on some of their tricks and traps, that being their flame weapons and their large monstrous units if they want to have any hope of breaking through this choke here. Against Doriath, however, it's a little bit of a different story. They're a little bit better equipped to fight these guys man-to-man, or elf-to-elf if you prefer. Some people do get quite irritated when I refer to elves as men. It's fine. Tolkien doesn't do. Anyway, the Marksmen of the Heavily Arched, however, are going to make that kind of difficult. Doriath does have a fairly well-armored core of units. All of the Regian units weigh in at about 8, with the only exception being the 9 on the Mounted Company, but they're not actually present on the battlefield today. And so the missiles from Gondolin are going to be the really important aspect here. So we saw some scouts, we saw some marksmen, and of course they've also got the Lords of the Golden Flower here as well, which basically outstrips anything in terms of quality that Doriath can conceivably throw at them, outside of perhaps some of the bodyguard units, and even then it's not really a sure thing. So the Lords of the Golden Flower are going to need to be taken down from range, if at all possible. That might be something that Doriath and Angband can work on together if Angband was to send them some crossbow support. Meanwhile, over here, the Philothrum have amassed to defend these 2 bridges leading into the Haven, and this is going to be interesting for the poor Tolkien Gauderhoth player, because he's facing off here 1-to-1 against this entire Philothrum army. He's got to fight through 2 narrow choke points that are going to make his life difficult, whereas Gondolin is going to be fighting against 2 factions over here. So this seems the most likely place, or the most likely place where you're going to see any kind of breakthrough. Certainly a more speedy breakthrough, I think, is going to be the case over here. But against Tolkien Gauderhoth, the Philothrum, I think, are going to do quite well. They've got a large number of Pullorm and Phalanx units, and really, there's not a ton of necessarily direct answers to that outside the Mangonel, outside the Ash Priests, and some of the Trappers. Over here you can see the Marines of Berthambar beginning to open up, Scar-High Blood Drinkers leading the way. It's not going to be fun. Turn up just a little bit there. Those Harassment Javelins coming in, and against the medium infantry, the generally about 6 or so armor, and the unshielded nature of this unit, Scar-High Blood Drinker is going to take terrible casualties coming in, but I suppose that was always inevitable for the Orcs of Tolkien Gauderhoth. There's also a unit of Long Fangs in here. If I was the Tolkien Gauderhoth player, I would try to pressure one particular wing here in order to leave it open for the throwing axes. There's some pretty substantial differences between throwing axes and javelins in our mod, and one of the biggest is that their throwing arc is differently. You can lob javelins in a much nicer arc than you can with the throwing axes. However, the throwing axes will bounce along the ground, so that's something to be aware of. Not sure what they were trying to throw there. I think they had a firing solution, and then the Blood Drinkers kind of moved in and then ruined it for them, so they weren't actually able to throw at anything. So, a little bit more coordination there, I think, needed on the part of the Tolkien Gauderhoth player, but again, Frodor Baggins, I feel so weird saying that. I feel like I'm having like a stroke or something. He's a newer player, and these are the sort of things that you just learn along the way, basically, like understanding the firing arcs and stuff like that. Marksmen of Balar in a very good position here, just lay down the pain, taking down many of those Scar-High Longfangs before they can even fire a single shot or throw a single axe, I suppose. They would be particularly nice against the Nobles of Balar and the lightly armored Marines of Berthambar. This is a place to get an extreme amount of value, but unfortunately they're just kind of blocked off by their own unit. It will rout off eventually, but the Philothrum under Captain Gervais are not going to give them that opportunity. So they're opening up here on the Marksmen of Balar, managing to take down a few of those heavily armored elites. But now the Marines of Aglarest are going to sally forth, and they're going to push the Longfangs out of here. It looks like a shield wall push here from them, just to make sure that they get gone quickly. This is a great way with these little shield wall pushes to break the morale of kind of lower end units, especially when they're being pressured by the marksmen up there on the hill. Very, very likely these guys will rout, but luckily Frodor Baggins sees an opportunity to beat feet, and he is going to retreat back towards his lines. Meanwhile, on the other side, nothing happening yet that's all that exciting. But over here, it looks like Doriath has begun to move forward and pressure the front line of Gondolin and the Marksmen of the Heavily Arched. They're going to have a field day with this. great opportunities for them to just lay down pain into the rear. Looks like he used some of his Wardens of the Girdle early on in the skirmishing, probably trying to take bites out of the Marksmen of the Heavily Arch, and indeed it seemed to work reasonably well. They've gone down from 103 or so models to 88, so some damage was done there. More Wardens of the Girdle now crossing in order to reinforce the hard-put-to-it heavy infantry of Doriath. And the Axe Guard here, fighting against the Guardsmen, they're going to do pretty well. They've actually managed to grind them down to under half strength, but with the Trebuchet crew in support, they are a halberd unit, and that is going to give them, I think, the edge that they need to hold the line here against the Axe Guard, as the halberds tend to be quite high attack, and they don't suffer from the penalties of other spear units, and so against the low melee defense of those axe units, honestly not a terrible idea. Wardens of the Girdle now piling in en masse. I'm pretty sure Angband is making an attempt here to ford the crossing mentioned to get their artillery piece right across there. You can see some halberdiers guarding the bridge in case something happens where the Elves of Gondolin attempt to come from the rear. Let's go ahead and slow things down here just a little bit. The vanguard of the Angband army has reached their lines. Got some Iron Drakes of Angband here, looking like they want to follow up. I think some mangonel shots, perhaps? But I don't think Steward of Dale is just going to let this happen. You can already see some movement in the back lines there. Scouts of the Tree would be a great answer to taking down these Iron Drakes very quickly. Looks like he's going to try and reposition. Maybe he wants to go after the scouts and use the body piercing of the fire weapons to just basically fire through this whole block. You can see some catapult over here as well, looking to reposition. A little bit of early fire here from some sort of flame weapon, not too sure what. But a lot of these Axemen of the Pillar and the Guardsmen of the Harp are being cut down by the Iron Shot Arbalists, and there's not really any archers or long-range support over here, so there's not a lot that Steward of Dale can really do to bully those Arbalists out of place. However, he does have a nice little ace in the hole here. He's got some cavalry, and if he's quick and surprises his enemy, those cavalry can do a lot of damage to a crossbow corps and really just kind of throw things into chaos. So he does at least have this going for him, but we'll see what he ends up doing with the Iron Drakes of Angband. However, I suspect very strongly are setting their sights on the catapult. The catapult can be such a nightmare for Angband, especially with those flaming shots. It really wreaks havoc on the Angband morale. That's one of the big faction weaknesses of Angband. Oh, damn. Opening up there with that fire shot, cleaving through both the artillery and the catapult there. Nasty, nasty indeed. About half of that catapult is going to go down here, and that happens to be the two best position units. So, the medium infantry here taken from the side. They're only going to get a portion of their shield value from that, and it is going to bring them from 102 to 77, so nearly a 25% loss in manpower there, and that kind of hurts because the catapult crew are pretty able medium infantrymen. Steward of Dale is now going to see, I think, how dire his situation is and the need to act being as strong as it currently is. He's going to go forward. He's going to take a bite out of the Iron Drakes. Hopefully, they are going to drop their lances there. Doesn't look like any casualties are going to be incurred. The Balrogs have moved forward, and they're going to tell those Knights of the Golden Flower exactly where to go. Quite a famous rivalry here, the House of the Golden Flower and the Balrogs, given that their lord was so heroic in the defense of his city of Gondolin, killed many Balrogs all to himself. Those Knights of the Golden Flower, inspired by their lord's courage, surely are going to turn around, round upon the Iron Drakes. They're actually going to kill off most of them here. They're going to bring them down from, I think they're about 20 or so, maybe about 18. They're going to take down about 4 of these guys and hightail it out of there, but they will carry forward into those Iron Shot Arbalists, and it's going to hurt. Another charge here. Another beautiful, glorious charge from those knights, and they're actually going to drop their lances there at the last moment and hammer those unprotected Arbalists, and that's pretty scary for them. Those Arbalists, I think, lost about 60 or so men, so a very fruitful sally out here from Steward of Dale, but of course it is going to cost him the knights of some of these, or the lives rather, of some of these valuable knights of the Golden Flower. Steward of Dale's front lines just really looking worse for wear here. The fire damage from the Iron Drakes and everything else taking its toll upon the medium guardsmen. The shield bearers of the tower are going to be able to stand up to that a little bit better with their heavier armor and better shield value. But Angband is going to take this opportunity here to apparently charge forward with some of the Arbalists. That looks like a big miss micro here on the part of Eclipse. You definitely don't want your Arbalists charging forward. They may be nearly out of ammunition, but I can see that some of them still have their primary weapon out. So he's going to see that, draw the Arbalists back, and he's just going to come in with all of the fury of the Dark Land of Angband. Reavers leading the way alongside the Balrogs, smashing their way through the lines of the Eldar. Very, very scary here indeed. Want to be careful with those elephants, though, around the shield bearers of the tower, as they do have a slightly higher spear bonus against mounts generally, and so the elephants could find themselves in dire straits if they stay in that blob for too long. Moving back on over here, Doriath. Really not doing well. We can see some breaking here. Some of the Axe Guard ground down to about 4 men. I think the light troops are still in the fray, but oh man, they're down to 7. This is really looking tough for Doriath. I think this is really down to the matchups that he chose to engage in here. There's a lot of heavily armored units here, especially the shield bearers of the tower and the armorers of the hammer in particular, and none of the Doriath armor piercing has been brought forward. That being said, there is some support here in the back lines. Marines of Berthalmbar, Marksmen of the Heavenly Arch, and I think he had his scouts of the tree hanging around up here. And all of those missiles would make things very difficult for the Doriath axe units, because they have such, well, the two-handed axemen who you'd want to use to smash apart this line, they don't have a shield, so you could lose them very, very quickly. So Belagast, I guess, just trying to play the long game here, slowly grind his enemies down by attrition, use up some of the resources, sling ammo, javelins, bows, etc., etc., and then just see where that gets him. Yeah, pretty tough matchup here, especially with the Lords of the Golden Flower on the front lines, just blender lording their way through these Doriath Region units, especially the swordsmen. These guys are going to cut them into tiny little gobs and mail them back to Thingol in tiny pieces, I guess. I don't know. I kind of lost track of that metaphor. Up here in the back, Rangers of the Girdle coming in from behind. These are some of the few genuinely scary skirmish units, and I think these should have been brought up a little bit earlier, especially with the Marines of Berthalmbar here. I know that the Scouts of the Tree were up here as well, raining down sling bullets into the packed ranks of Doriath, and these guys would be a great way to pressure them and to make sure they don't stay there and don't just use up all their ammunition. Although it's entirely possible that Belagast has resigned himself to being sort of a sacrificial lamb here. Maybe he's just trying to expend as much of the defending resources as possible. But I don't think that's a good idea to do as Doriath. I think that's more of a job for Tolin Gauderhof. But in any case, let's pop back across the field here. Those Rangers being driven out of place now by the presence of those bowmen. Scouts just kind of hanging out here, and it looks like, ooh, some nasty stuff beginning to loom on the horizon here for Tolin Gauderhof. Scarhide Blooddrinkers being completely surrounded. I don't know how that happened. Perhaps this... Oh yeah, I see. There's ways around they can use to outflank the attackers. So a nice move here. Although 1-to-1 with the Arankir-Lim, Scarhide Blooddrinkers will trade reasonably well. The Arankir-Lim extremely expensive and very limited, both in cap and by unit size. The heavy damage and armor-piercing nature of the the Blooddrinkers rather, is going to help them actually cleave through a number of these models, and every one of them that dies is a loss dearly felt, especially moving in to the endgame. Over here, Gijek Scat is chosen, squaring off against Nobles of Balar, and I think Marines of Berthalmbar, yes indeed. Over here, some Long Fangs have come back, and they're trying to exact revenge upon the Marines of Eglarest, but this is sort of in a similar situation, I suppose, to where he was previously. We got over here. Oh, it looks like somebody got fried. A big mangonel shot from the Tolin Gauderhof side, coming in, cleaving through a whole bunch of Marines of Eglarest as they were spaced out up there, and now they've actually pushed forward into Blooddrinkers and into, I think, Trappers as well. And this is not going very well for those poor Marines of Eglarest. They're about to meet a very sticky end indeed. But they're just basically cutting off reinforcements while the Arankir-Lim and the rest of the army dealt with the force that the Tolin Gauderhof players sent forward. So some nice plays there on the part of the defenders. This is exactly the sort of proactive, shall I say, defense that you kind of need to come out ahead in siege battles, but I think especially in Silmarillion Total War, I think we've got a good handle on like faction balance kind of generally. So when it comes to sieges, it's actually somewhat ironically made sieges a tricky thing to get right. But I think this is exactly the way that you want to play this. Down here, the Longfangs getting absolutely butchered, and the rest of the Chosen being fairly steadily overwhelmed by this block of Philothrum infantry. Ooh, another big shot over there, raining down fire and destruction upon the Nobles of Balar and the Warriors of Eglares as they move forward. A little bit more aggressive than I think I personally would have been if I was in Gervais's formation, because that mangonel is definitely not out of ammunition at this point. So, something to be afraid of for sure. Popping back over to the other side, it looks like Gondolin has succeeded in breaking through that first wave of Doriath attackers, and now the Rangers of the Girdle being caught out here by some nasty things indeed. Shield Bearers of the Tower, and I saw some of the Lords of the Golden Flower mixed in. That being said, if nothing else, he has expended a lot of Defender ammunition and done a number on the Lords of the Golden Flower. But at what cost, I ask you? Nonetheless, Lords of the Golden Flower are an extremely important unit to have moving into the endgame, and so being able to deal that kind of damage to them right now, it's not the worst thing in the world. I think this Ballista is probably trying to go after the Marksmen of the Heavenly Arch there. Let's see what they end up shooting at. But there's a big old Gondolin blob here, which I think would be a great target while they're cleaning up the remnants of his Doriath infantry that you could use to kind of punish them a little bit with this Ballista. But let's see what they shoot. Nothing, apparently. Okay, how exciting. I think he's probably switched targets. Maybe he's trying to go after some of the Shield Bearers of the Tower there. But we're going to move on from that. Meanwhile, down here, Angband really pressing hard. Scouts of the Tree trying to hold back a phalanx of Ironshot Halberdiers here, along with the Tormentors of the Iron Crown. But that being said, the mace on these guys is going to help them trade reasonably well, at least with the Macemen who are moving forward. It's going to be difficult for the Scouts to get close to the Halberds, unless the Halberds move to them like they are currently doing. But they will trade reasonably well with the Tormentors and the low skill of those units. Oh, damn. Some nasty fire moving down here, and it looks like Gondolin has managed to break through much of this Angband lineup. A lot of friendly fire, I think, from the Angband fire pieces, and oh, it's just wreaked complete and utter havoc here. But Angband is taking it back, almost suckering them out of position. You can see that he's now brought some of those Tormentors who were fighting the Scouts here earlier. He's brought them forward to help buffer the line here. He's thrown in his elephants, and this is exactly what you want to do. Got the Iron Drakes of Angband there in the back as well. Mangonel raining fire, and now the Iron Drakes opening up as well. Not killing all that many of the heavy infantry, but the lighter units, the catapult crew, and the scouts are really going to suffer under the weight of that incendiary assault. Let's look at just at least one more good shot here. Oh, so nasty. Oh, wow, a little bit of lag there as they just cleave their way through. The dragons aren't even going to notice it. Knights of the Golden Flower trying to get some rear charges here on the Uruloki. It looks like they managed to take at least one of them down. And the Philothrum aren't ready to abandon this choke point yet either. It looks like some Marines of Bathombar moving up here. They may still have some ammunition. Marinos of Erendil trying to shut down some of these Valoralkar who have managed to make it into the back lines, but Gondolin really suffering heavy there. Another big volley from those Iron Drakes. Absolutely disgusting. Cleaving through the Gondolindrim, and what was a strong victory has actually been turned into defeat here by Eclipse. Gotta say, really, really good play here. Use the momentum of Stu's own attacks against it. Oh, another brutal volley there. Gonna break, I think, a lot of these units, except for the heavy infantry, who aren't really hurting too badly for it. You can see maybe one or so, maybe 3 models going down, but the light infantry, damn does that hurt. And then they start to break, and the other units get spooked, and now these Armors of the Hammer, despite their massive morale and defensive capabilities, they're really struggling here, and I think part of it also has to do with the fear from both the Uruloki and the Bulldogs in the back here. Iron Drakes, crossbows, reaping a terrible toll. A lot of value off of this Mangonel so far as well. I don't think we saw it earlier, but there were some nasty, nasty shots from that Mangonel that just just absolutely fried both his own lines and those of his enemy. And then he was able to turn the momentum of the Gondolin from surging forward to his advantage. Really well played. Over in the back here, you can see some Marines of Berthalmbar, some reinforcements sent in, being cleaved in twain by the Balrogs, who are just sundering flesh from bone with terrifying efficacy. And now this choke point here officially belongs to Angband. It cost him quite a lot to get through there, and there is still some small pockets of resistance. Scouts of the tree here, I think, have started to turn the tables against the Ironshot Halberdiers, as I believe Eclipse tried to pull them out, and the scouts were able to move forward and start to surround them, break up that formation, and now they're able to cut them apart in close quarters. But moving on over this way, you can see that Doriath now coming in with some of their heavy-hitting units. Got those Warriors of Region here charging into the front of these exhausted and nearly completely expended Guardsmen of the Harp, supported by the Trebuchet crew. But this is a losing battle for sure. Over here, the Shield Bearers of the Tower, they do fight very well in like small choke points like this, but I think over time the Warriors of Region will be able to cleave them apart, especially with the fatigue differential between these units. But the big deciding factor is, of course, going to be the Marksmen of the Heavenly Arch, and they're just laying down the pain. This is exactly this kind of target that they want to go after. High damage, high ammunition pool, and they're shooting at some units that just don't have a lot of defense against missiles. Popping on over here, things not looking great for Tolim Gaurhoff. Again, they've pushed forward, the Philothrum have pushed forward into the attacking forces, but now Tolim Gaurhoff's starting to exact a toll of their own, I think. Some of these Nobles of Balar here, completely unsupported, unshielded, taking it on the chin, but there goes Sauron, the General, and that, I think, is just terrible, terrible news. I think that probably happened over this way, and that was a result of the hard target javelins. Let me just have a short aside here so that people can understand a little bit about why that was a really risky play that didn't pay off. So the hard target javelins have a lower projectile speed than the harassment javelins, which means that when you have an elephant unit like Sauron in particular, it's very easy for you to just kind of micromanage them and dodge that incoming fire like Neo from the Matrix. But when you're in a small area like this and you're just trying to bum rush them and catch them off guard, well, this is sometimes the thing that can happen, and poor Sauron really got the worst of it in that exchange. And those Marines of Eglarist have now very much paid for themselves with just that one blow. And that's going to take down the General as well, strike fear into the hearts of the Wolves of Golkala, and it is unlikely that they will continue to fight for very long. However, Hishbukras Ash Priests in here might have something to say about that. They do have a powerful inspiration effect of +3, but we'll see. We'll see if they're able to get through here. I think based on what there is still remaining, plus with the presence of the Ash Priests, assuming no additional reinforcements, this is going to be a place where Tolim Gaurhoff is finally able to break through, but at terrible cost. Loss of Sauron, their General, and some of their most expensive units. Over here, Nobles of Balar, not a bad place for them to be. They could probably grind down most of this blob. Hishbukras Hunter's looking real worse for wear here. I think now they're taking some of the ammunition from the Marksmen of Balar, but I'm pretty sure they paid for themselves by slaughtering a whole bunch of those Rangers of Brithombar. And if you look at the percentages here, reasonably in favor of the defenders in like a really big way. This is kind of the thing that you want to have as the defenders. You want to have a good advantage moving out of your first choke point. We can already see some units now beginning to be drawn back, and they're going to be falling back up here. And I think the rest of the Philothrum armies will probably move up into this final choke point once the attackers begin to break through. And speaking of breaking through, some nastiness over here. The Lords of the Golden Flower, if they get their hands on the Uruloki and the Balrogs, then maybe they can turn around this engagement. But, oh, fire spray coming in from the Iron Drakes, not letting them have the opportunity to even get close to those elephants. Great play there on the part of Eclipse. And this is really, I think, how the fire units should be used. I mean, you're creating blobs, you're creating targets that people want to go for. Oh, down goes one of the Balrogs, though, fallen to the Lords of the Golden Flower. Nonetheless, you are creating targets for your Iron Drakes by offering up some fairly expensive stuff. So it's a bit of a risk-reward thing, and that's exactly how I wanted to see the fire units used. So really excited to see it pay off here, but also excited to see that it's not completely overwhelming, as one of those Balrogs will, of course, fall for the Lords of the Golden Flower, and they're starting to get second thoughts maybe about being somewhere else. They just remember they have something in the oven, and it's entirely possible that these Lords of the Golden Flower will flee from the field. Marines of Bethombar being cut to bits over here. Another unit of Guardsmen of the Harp being brought in to try and deal with the remnants of some of the Angband units here, but it's just not going to be enough. Uruloki, Balrogs, they're going to be able to cut through these guys with relatively no danger, especially now that Doriath has arrived on scene. They definitely have a bone to pick with these Lords of the Golden Flower who were so instrumental in cutting apart their first wave of infantry. So you can see the Ballista crew here, along with a horde of Warriors of Region having pushed in here, and that means that for sure they have broken through this first line. Kuthalim now following things up, and you're going to see the really important units from Doriath here. The Tiad en Lysedanen going to be an absolute terror for units like the Nobles of Balar and the Donath en Mablung as well. Very, very heavily armored. They've got armor-piercing, high damage values, and of course, they're full strength. This is exactly what you want to have moving into this late stage. They've managed to eat up a lot of defending resources, so it's, I think, fairly even despite the percentages having a pretty substantial advantage in terms of numbers for the defenders. And now you can see the rest of these units falling back. A battered company of the Marinos of Erendil, about half strength, a little bit over 60 or so percent, and the rest of these units, some reserves here of Armors of the Hammer, still full strength, Retainers of the King, I guess Marksmen of Balar here as well. I wonder whatever became of the Marksmen of the Heavenly Arch. You can see a lot of Falafrim here retreating from this secondary choke point. Marksmen of Balar moving up there as well. I wonder what happened to those Marksmen of the Golden Flower, though. Meanwhile, over here, on the Tolling Gauderhoth side of things, the Nobles of Balar exacting a heavy toll to cross this particular bridge. These Dominion of Tolling Gauderhoth units are finally pushing their way through, Chosen leading the way, as they do in this kind of situation, and the Nobles of Balar are going to be overwhelmed next to the Golden Flower, meeting their end over here as they try to support this beleaguered unit of Falafrim, but pinned against the river and this bridge. There's really nowhere for them to go, and they will die off. Over here, Gitaxkata's Wolfguard and the Ash Priests have managed to batter their way through the Falafrim, and so the attackers are well and truly into the first layer of the city, but it is not over yet, not by a long shot. There are still some secondary choke points that have to be pushed through, and it is not going to be an easy thing at all. If we look up here, it looks like Scouts of Eglarest being drawn back up. Not a bad idea. You probably don't want to expend them on suicidal charges because, as I mentioned, they can act as an infantry reserve. And so that's probably the best way, I think, to use them in this situation. And so, Scouts of Eglarest moving forward, maybe looking to delay things a little bit if they're able, but there are still a hand to play, I think. Captain Gervais and Stewie have elected to... pool some of their resources and stick them over here, which honestly I think is an interesting play. It does stop the attackers from bringing everything to bear all at once against a final choke point. So I think this is actually a really smart play. They have to kind of keep things back, because if they don't and they go like all in, or if they don't see this and they go all in, then you're going to have Champions of the Fountain and some Marines of Eglarest, both of which are very scary for Angband for different reasons. Obviously, the Marines of Eglarest, we've seen how powerful they can be against elephants, having jibbed Sauron in just 1 or 2 volleys. And the Champions of the Fountain, as I mentioned earlier, are relentless, and they are infantry blending machines. And this is not a unit that I think Angband can really afford to go toe-to-toe with what they have remaining, and still hope to be a viable force moving into the end game and able to pressure that final defense up here on the hill. Scouts of Eglarest, yeah, thinking better of that. I would too. You see a bunch of Balrogs, like Uruloki and an artillery piece around the corner there supporting arbalists and things like that, then you're definitely going to hightail it out of there. Halberdiers here, it looks like there is a detachment of them left. Still fresh, still good to go, and they're moving in to support the rest of the Angband army as well. But I think this is basically it from the once mighty host that Angband had at their disposal. But that being said, they've got some key units. They've got Iron Drakes, they've got elephants, they've got artillery, they've got a decent enough force of Bulldogs, about 20 or so of them right there. Some Halberdiers to support them, and some crossbows as well. So Angband still in it, just not with a ton of numbers. That being said, I wonder how they're going to address this tiny little splinter force in behind their lines. That'll be interesting to see. Moving on over this way, let's take stock of what Tolin Gauderhoth still has remaining to them. Scarhide Trappers, they still have ammo? Oh, they do, I think. Maybe. Yeah, I can see some of them with javelins in their hands. So definitely still some ammunition on this unit. Ash Priests, basically full strength at this point. A few of them are a little bit bloodied up, but that's okay. I got some Wolfguard as well, quite tired. Chosen, who are getting tired the more that they run. Scarhide Trappers here, I think more of them with javelins. Yeah, I can see some in hand. And then some Long Fangs here. So, again, mostly utility units. Hopefully Doriath has something serious to bring to the table here. Mangonel as well from Tolin Gauderhoth. Don't know how much ammunition they're going to have left, though. And then Doriath kind of has the quality, which is what you'd expect in this kind of composition. Tieren Leisdanen, Kuthalim, who I think got charged in the rear by some scouts earlier, potentially, which is why they're not at full strength anymore. Warriors of Region, Donath, and a surprisingly large amount of warriors here. They managed their reserves really well. Got to hand it to him. I mentioned there were some mistakes with not supporting the initial wave, I think the way that he should have. I probably would have gone a bit farther, but you have to hand it to Belagos. He has managed his reserves very well. And now the attackers are pretty strong going into the late game here. They've got all the utility that they need from the Orcish factions who, let's face it, they have a lot of good utility units. And then you've got the brute strength of Doriath here in fairly healthy numbers. So this is going to be a hell of a fight for those defenders. We're going to go ahead and fast forward here just a little bit, moving into this final engagement. I'll see you guys in just a few moments. And so, moving into that final stage of the game here, Frodor Baggins very wisely screening the approach of his army with these Chosen. I have to say, I want to draw some attention to this because he may be new at Silmarillion, but he's obviously not new at Medieval 2. So not only is he properly screening his approach here, there was a unit of cavalry up there on the hill waiting to be a complete pain in the ass, but he's also waited very patiently for the armies of Angband to begin to move up here, and that's basically going to make the position that this cavalry held untenable completely. So really, really nicely done there on the part of Frodor Baggins. Just goes to show that sometimes you can do a lot by really doing nothing at all. But anyway, let's move on here. The Scouts of Eglorest see an opportunity to go after the Valaraukar, but the Valaraukar very wisely being supported by some halberdiers. That's not something that you want to play around with, not as cavalrymen in any case. So they're going to try and get a rear and a flank charge off on the halberdiers. Nicely played there on the part of Rex. He's going to go right to the armor value of those halberdiers, and because the base damage of the scouts being melee cavalry is quite high, that's actually really effective. You can see he killed off about 25% of the unit there, and doubtless claimed 1 or 2 HP from the mighty Balrogs, the Valaraukar. The Spirits of Fire can be so scary moving into this late game, so just slowly chipping away here at the remaining advantages of the attacking force. However, he's going to need to get out of there very quickly. Iron Drakes on their way, along with a host of Doriathrim, and Tieren Leisdanen, and of course the Mangonel. Let's see what's going on over here. And yeah, exactly what I thought would happen. So, a bunch of the strength of the attackers needing to be kept back here. And you can see, oh, maybe a bit of movement. A bit of movement here on the part of the defending forces. Marines of Eglorest are a big threat to a unit like the Donathan Mablung because of the nature of that particular javelin unit. So they could kill off the Donath here and the warriors very, very quickly indeed. So this is going to be a tough fight. If they advance forward, it's going to be down to Belagos to take the initiative, try and close the ground quickly, or just fall back and maybe try and use some of the artillery or some of the elephant units to their advantage. But again, that's going to be a risk. Marines are spearmen and they're hard target javs, so it's something that you want to be very, very aware of and not take any unnecessary risks. Moving back over here. Oh, it looks like the scouts are trying to take another bite here out of the Ironshot Halberdiers. They're going to get a few more of the Halberdiers, about 3 of them or so models, and Valaraukar are going to just fall back behind the protective screen here of the Halberds. Iron Drakes now forward. These medium medium cavalry scouts, you know, they don't want to take it directly because it's not going to be nice for them because they don't have the heaviest armor, but they are cavalry, and so their spacing is a little bit different. That does not exactly play into the body-piercing nature of those, of the Iron Drakes. Rex being very, very aggressive here. Going to have to be careful not to throw these guys away because, as I said, you can use them as infantry, and the high-mass nature of cavalry can sometimes be useful in pushing waves of enemy units back. And as a defender, you can't really afford to throw anything away. It could be potentially game-changing. I think he sees an opportunity here. Frodor feeling quite confident. I think he's going to go right for the Gijek Scar's Wolf Guard if he can. Hopefully he doesn't go for the spears. Nope, that's definitely not what you want to do. The mace units and axe units tend to have lower melee defense, with maces being sort of the higher end of the melee defense side of things. I don't know what he's doing. Oh, very sneaky indeed. Another pathway that will allow him to get in behind the screen of Frodor Baggins. We'll see how that goes for him. A lot of these stakes have actually been bullied out of the way by, I believe, the presence of the artillery, probably running them over and pancaking them. Let's see what he does. I'm curious. I'm curious to see how these units get used. Well, looks like he's changing his mind. We'll see. We'll come back to them. Meanwhile, over here, the combined hosts of the remnants of Angband as well as the Doriathrin are making their way up here. And the siege, a siege within a siege. I heard you guys like sieges, so now you get a siege within a siege. Oh, nasty. Brutalizing those Rangers of Brathambar. Fricasseeing about a fifth or so of the unit there right off the go. Very nicely done by Eclipse, punishing a momentary lapse in judgment there by Captain Rex. Very, very close indeed. Over here, you can see the scouts of Eglarest being engaged by the Valaraukar. Not a terrible engagement. Like, melee cavalry do decent enough against elephants, and these Valaraukar are looking a little bit worse for wear. But I think Rex has different designs here. He probably wants to go for the Wolf Guard. That would make the most sense. Yes, and yes, indeed, that's what he's going to go for. Nice little downhill charge there into the Wolf Guard. You can see the effect. It's not too bad. Not too bad at all. But he might just try and force his way through, use the mass, try and get into the Long Fangs, do all the damage that he possibly can do, especially against the Trappers. That's going to be pretty nasty, but the Ash Priests are certainly going to have something to say about that. Especially with the fear-causing nature of those units, I don't expect this is going to get too far. Let's see if the Trappers decide to maybe toss a volley of Javelins. That would shut down the cavalry, but of course they're going to want their Javelins moving in, so if they toss them at Rex, well, that's resources they don't have to harass the main line. So that could be the strategy here. Ooh, nasty. Yep, they're going to take some serious damage from that, but we have a Mangonel shot here. Murdering! Oh my goodness, that is disgusting. That is so much quality lost from the defenders here. That is potentially game-winning shot from that Mangonel. Frying its way through Nobles of Balar. 30 or so of them, and I think about 40, over 40 of the Irankir Limb. This was previously a completely full-strength fresh unit. Going to take down some of the Marinos of Erendil as well. About 100 or so of the flower of Elven nobility lying in a charred pile on the ground. Absolutely devastating. That is just so punishing. Well done there on the part of Eclipse. He saw a great target, chose the right thing, and just it really paid off for him. So fantastic work there. Yeah, that is nasty. Looks like he's eager to follow up that initial success with some hits here from the Iron Drakes, but we're going to come back to them. I want to see the fate of this cavalry. It looks like they were ultimately routed off, managing to kill a few of the Trappers, use up some of their ammunition, so I suppose ultimately it ended up being worth it, but yeah, there goes the cavalry, and that's basically all the mobility and everything else for the defenders outside of this final choke point here, and this is quickly turning in to a charnel house. Marksmen of Balar trying to lay down a little bit of pressure in return. The Iron Drakes, rather, are, I think, trying to get a good shot off here on the Marksmen of Balar. Oh, another shot there into the Retainers of the King, frying its way through some of the armorers. Another one there, claiming more of the Irankir Limb. But the Irankir Limb will be successful with that sally in pushing out the Iron Drakes. That's what I like to see. This proactive defense, not just waiting back, getting shot, and hoping for the best. No. Rex is not going to just sit here and take it. He's going to move forward, push those Iron Drakes out of there. And now Eclipse, for his troubles, is going to draw his Iron Drakes back behind his lines, realizing it's a little bit too hot for the moment. And that will be something of a stay of execution here for the Philothra. Marksmen of Balar here really taking it on the chin from the Tyrian Lysdan, and those armor-piercing throwing axes reaping a terrible cost through the ranks of these elite marksmen. And the Kuthalim as well, supporting them. You can see those green chemtrails in. That's a great sign that you're being shot with something that's an armor-piercing projectile. Marksmen of Balar there, being forced to retreat after losing as about 20 or so models there. Some to fire, some to the axes of the Tyrian Lysdanen. They've also taken a little bit of casualties here. I think from the marksmen in turn, they're sort of exchanging blows there from the top of the hillside. Iron Drakes of Angband now moving forward. Hopefully Steward sees it. There's an opportunity here to smash into those Iron Drakes, and to, or at the very least to bully them back out of position. But now the attackers are kind of playing into the hands of the defenders. You can see some of those rangers there eager to exact revenge upon the Iron Drakes for frying so many of their fellows earlier on in the battle. Now a charge here from the Armorers of the Hammer going to engage the Tyrian Lysdanen, who I can only assume are out of ammunition. Supporting fire from the Rangers rather, raining down amongst the ranks of the Guard of Fallen Leaves. Looks like they actually do still have some ammunition remaining, so Belagos is going to be quick to retreat them here and get them out of the arm's reach, basically, of the Armorers of the Hammer. Let's see what's going on over here. And now the reserves have moved in. This is pretty scary. Champions of the Fountain taking up position here. Are they going to go and fight inside of this little fountain area? Oh god, I hope they do that. That would just be amazing. Marines of Eglarest here, threatening, basically inviting any sort of challenge from the defenders, maybe just testing their awareness a little bit. I know that they want to go after some of these things like the Uruloki, for example, or the Balrogs in particular. They could probably kill off both of those units at this late stage in the game with the amount of damage that they've taken. But they could also do a severe amount of hurt to the Donathan Mablung and the rest of these units. They could definitely wipe out the Kuthalim, and that would be the general for Doriath, and that would certainly make things very complicated. And now they're moving forward, ready for battle. Let's see how the attackers kind of react to this. Iron Drakes have now moved forward again. They're about to get pinned against a building here. Ooh, Eclipse is going to see it. He's going to see his danger, and he's going to get out of there as quickly as possible. The remains of the Halberd lines being supported by the Bulldogs, and giving the Iron Drakes an opportunity to escape here. Arankir Lim going to rush forwards, but they're actually going to open themselves up to some damage here from the Tyrian Lysdanen, or from the Iron Drakes, if Eclipse so chooses. Oh yeah, look at that. Nasty shots there into the Arankir Lim, throwing them all over the place. Most of them are going to get back up, but some of them certainly are not. Those armor-piercing axes finding the mark and embedding themselves in those Philothran nobles. Well, that's pretty ugly for them. Yeah, a lot of damage being done there, but I don't know, maybe it's just the lumps you gotta take. They've at least ate up the rest of the Tyrian Lysdanen ammunition, which now will not be able to be used against the Nobles of Balar. That's kind of their ace in the hole a little bit. If they can force an engagement on level ground, in any case. Polearm units don't do amazing when fighting downhill. Champions of the Fountain and the Marines of Eglarest almost crested that hill, but now we're going to see a response here from the attackers. Doriath can peel off the Donathan Mablung and the ballista crew there. And some Tyrian Lysdanen as well might be drawn back into that engagement. Kuthalim, however, going to hold their ground along with the rest of the Doriath axe units. And Angband not having a great time up here in the hill. Having to fight uphill against some of the highest quality units in the Gondolin roster is never going to go well for them. Even with the Bulldogs, there's just not enough of them to really make a serious difference. And the Bulldogs, much like the rest of the Angband roster, are pretty vulnerable to armor piercing because they rely on it so much for their unit budgets. And so, Armors of the Hammer having a great time here, slicing and dicing their way through these Bulldogs. Belagos pushing forward here, managing to catch some of those Rangers of Berthombar. He probably wants to carry forward maybe into the Arankir Lim, or to hold his position, maybe try and outflank these guys here. We certainly got some reserves. I think now would be a really good time for maybe Fordor Baggins to try and move in and support Belagos' advance here. I think the Warriors of Region could just charge forward here into the Arankir Lim, but instead they're going to be charged in turn from the flank and from the rear, and now they're being pressured by some pretty nasty volley fire coming in from the remaining Marksmen of Balar and those Rangers. So, a bit of a misstep there, I think, on the part of Belagos. There was an opportunity to create a big-ass gap here and to flood in with the rest of the units and then move in with support units, Balrogs, everything else, and that could have been the play to end this here and now, but I don't think we're going to see it. The defenders will be able to stabilize, and he's left, very wisely, has Rex left a gap here that he can use to continuously punish these Warriors of Region and chip away at the numbers of quality remaining for the attackers. Let's pop on down here. It's like Tyrion Lysdanen. Oh, they've got these guys cornered. So he doesn't want to go down and lead the way with his Donathan Mablung. At least I hope he doesn't do that, because those the Marines of Eglarest, rather, are going to have a field day with that. Hopefully they still have a little bit of ammunition here. Might be able to use that to exchange fairly evenly with the Marines of Eglarest, but let's see what happens. Oh yeah, they're reloading. It's kind of offering them here as like a sacrificial lamb, essentially. Let's see who gets it off first. Looks like it's going to be the Javelin men. It's going to hurt. Did they actually throw anything? Weird. It's very strange indeed. Might be some bugginess here with those units not being close enough, or maybe there was like very, very little ammunition left. Only 1 or 2 axes actually could be thrown. Don't know. That was very strange. And certainly not an auspicious start for Lord of Belagost's offensive here against these remaining flanking reserves from the defenders. We'll come back in just a moment. We'll see what happens. Meanwhile, up here, ooh, some fire damage. Oh, they're just getting slaughtered here by these marksmen at close range. It's basically a firing squad. You can see a lot of those important and valuable Dordiath axemen getting just fried, cooked to the bone by those Promethean arrows, essentially coming in from the Marksmen of Balar. Very nasty indeed, and that could cause a bit of a rout here. The Warriors of Region definitely don't appreciate that, and we could see them begin to flee. I want to see what's happening down here. Looks like the Tyrion Lysdanen. Oh man, they really just hammered those Marines of Eglarest really, really hard. I think they're probably out of ammunition at this point. In they go. And Stewart of Dale is going to bring the Blender Lords of the Fountain forward. Countercharge here from both sides. Very nasty as those 2 regiments of elite elven infantry collide with one another. But I think for sure, both in terms of quality and of numbers, the Champions of the Fountain are going to have no problem here, slicing and dicing their way through the guards of fallen leaves. But Belagos still has something to say about it. I think he's being very wise with the way that he deploys his troops here. Ooh, look at that. I wonder if this is actually going to come to something. This is some great teamwork, if so. Certainly a good attempt here on the part of Froder Baggin to assist his ally. Really good like map awareness and things like that. Let's see if they're actually able to do anything here. I hope so. And fast forward a little bit. I don't know if they're going to have the firing arc to do this. I don't think they will. Still, nonetheless, a great attempt there at some pretty solid teamwork. Champions of the Fountain having a great time here. This is exactly where they want to be, and they're going to blender their way through these troops. I think the Marines still have some ammo left over, so they're just waiting for enough pressure to be applied to this front line for the Donathan Mablung to be obliged to be brought forward. Like I said, champions are taking steady damage. But we'll come back to that in just a moment. Up here, things not looking so great. You can see the Warriors of Region have been pushed back. The House of the King has been brought in to fill this gap here, and now, alongside the Marinos of Erendil, they've managed to re-establish some semblance of order on the defending front lines. You can see that the Nobles of Balar are being brought forward as well, but again, polearm units fighting downhill, they don't do nearly as well as they do on flatter ground. And so they are going to take some additional casualties here. Nobles of Balar falling at a reasonably steady rate. There's still some hands left to play, however. This side getting thin, Belagos punishing that with some fire from the Kuthalim, managing to do lots and lots of damage to them. Oh, the Iron Drakes, though, frying some of those Retainers of the King. It's not going to hit too hard because what we have here are some of the heaviest units in the Gondolin roster. But nonetheless, let's take a look at that. See if those Iron Drakes want to go for one more. I think they might. Opportune. Ooh, look at that. Cooking them like chicken dinner. Only killing a couple. Again, heavy infantry do stand up to that quite nicely. But it's noticeable. It's definitely something that the defenders need to watch out for. And I think they're cooking their own mangonel there too. Oops. More of the Retainers of the King. Every single one lost, however, is a loss dearly felt. And the Marinos of Erendil are mixed in there as well. And they are not going to stand up nearly as well to that fire. Ooh, another brutal shot there. And I think that's going to be enough to actually break the Mariners. Break them at 20 men remaining. It's such a loss for the defenders. Oh, that's terrible news. And so it seems like the attackers are starting to retake the advantage in that final choke point. And as we move down here, Champions of the Fountain have blundered their way through most of the units sent by Belagost to assist in their removal. But he still has an ace in the hole here, doesn't he? Stewart is patiently waiting for it. You can see those Marines of Eglares just hanging out, just waiting for these Donathan to be brought forward, and that moment is rapidly approaching as ballista crew down to 9. I think there's still some Tyrden Leistdanen in there, but very few models still remaining. And now these guys are moving forward in the shield wall formation, so yeah, now might be a good time to try and move in and try and just get into the champions as quickly as possible and limit the amount of damage being done by those Marines of Eglares. If he shifts the unit to the left here, and then fights alongside what remains of the warriors, etc., then he should be able to mitigate most of the incoming damage. But oh, he's going to take at least one volley there. It's going to hurt. It's going to bring down one of the Donath. I think he's going to have to eat at least one more before he gets in. Oh, Stewart is going to draw back, though. Now those champions are going to move forward. A third sort of anemic volley coming in. But I don't think the Marines are going to be able to hit them, not en masse. A few of them will have a firing solution, though. Really nicely played there on the part of Stewart of Dale. It remains to be seen if the Donathan Mablung can just batter their way through these remaining troops. Possibly. Yeah, there's still 44 of them left. The Marines of Eglares now out of ammunition. I don't know. Yeah, they far surpass the Champions of the Fountain in terms of quality, so we'll see. I think the Donathan Mablung are going to be pretty worse for wear coming out of that fight, though. What do we got here? Still got trappers. Probably still got, like, ash priests and stuff. Iron drakes. And they've actually managed to almost summit this hill here with the use of the Balrogs and the Uruloki and stuff in the back, just wreaking absolute havoc, smashing their way through a reserve unit here of the Warriors of Eglares, knocking them over. Not too many dying there. You can see the Balrogs fighting on the front lines, smashing their way through some of these elites. The retinue of Círdan himself being brought forward. I think there's just like Marinos of Erendil who are just fighting to the death and just running this way and that. The guy doesn't even know what to do with himself. Chaos is everywhere. The House of the King now down to just a meager 22. They're being battered through here with some reinforcements from Tolin Galroth, and I'm almost positive the Ash Priests are at the center of that. Yeah, you can see them right here being brought forward. Looking a little bit worse for wear than when we saw them last time, but they're going to manage to make it into the Marksmen, and they're going to have a great time with this. The Marksmen are good at fighting like mid-tier chaff units, but because they use the Skirmisher template, they do not have the stats to go toe-to-toe with elite units, like heavy, super elite units like the Ash Priests. And they're going to butcher these guys.
They have lost half their men.
Oh yeah, the Ash Priests are having a great time with this. Those Marksmen and Baylor, I think, are going to start to fall in quite startling numbers. Warriors of Eglares in the back here, doing their thing. That's some Marksmen of Baylor squaring off against the Uruloki, who are just feasting upon these Rangers of Brithambar. And they're going to turn around and do the same to the Marksmen in just a few moments, unless they are somehow stopped. Most of the Balrogs are dead, except for this one single Balrog here, trying to batter his way through the remains of these Philotherim. Yet more reserves being brought forward here. Got some Scarahide trappers and some Kuthalim to come. Mangonel troops as well. At this late stage in the game, against all of this that's been fighting for most of the game, heavily reduced, the Mangonel crew will actually do pretty well. A surprising amount of damage here. Not Balrog, representative of Gothmog, in fact, with the axe and the helmet. The High Captain of Angband trying to smash his way through the remaining Philothron resistance. Doing his best, but I don't know how much longer he's going to be able to do this. He's looking pretty bloodied up. Pretty worse for wear. And down he goes. The Captain of Angband fallen in this siege of the Isle of Swans. But this is, I don't know, it's hard to say. It's relatively close for both sides, just a 1% difference. Let's pop back down here and see what the result of this is going to be. Some Marines here tried to push their way through. Champions of the Fountain, however, end up being cleaned out completely by the Donathan Mablung, who managed to maintain pretty decent numbers. If they're thrown back up into the fray against the defenders, this could be a game-winning unit right here. Having this in your pocket with still reasonable numbers at this late stage in the siege, that's huge. That's potentially just massive. Two of them just boxing this one remaining champion of the Fountain in between the two of them. A little bit of a duel here between the Donathan Mablung Guardsman and one of the great champions of the Fountain. And you can see the difference. One has a block animation, the other doesn't. And just the amount of damage that one can do over the other. It's pretty stark. He's going to die if he turns his back. Yeah, and down he goes. So that one champion is actually going to take that fight. The rest of the crew is going to see it, though, and they're going to have no patience for it. And down he goes. And so, in total, about 31 remaining Donathan Mablung, and no troops outside left for the defenders. 95 to 94, such a close game. A meager 1% difference for the defenders, but I think the attackers are starting to run out of steam now. There's not going to be much left for the Donathan Mablung to support. Awesome Javies, though, still remaining. Great shot here for them. Kuthalim are now pushing into the fray. Nobles of Balar under heavy, heavy pressure from the remaining Scar-High Trappers, who I think just ran out of ammunition. And so, if the rest of these troops here are kind of thrown in and used to body block for the Donathan Mablung, hopefully they can get here quickly. I see them walking up that hill. I know that's a wise choice, but time is very much of the essence right now, so it might even be worth it to just run them. There goes the Falas General, cut down. That could be huge for the attackers, so you might start to see some units begin to break, even with the presence of the Arain Efadun. The loss of their leader is going to weigh heavily upon the hearts of the remaining defenders, which is almost exclusively Philothron, although there is still a small number of retainers of the king rallying to their lord. Looks like the Uruloki were finally taken down, but damn, at what cost? Those rangers completely destroyed. These Marksmen of Balar are losing about half of their number to those ferocious beasts. More Javies still remaining. Another beautiful shot there, killing most of the remaining retinue of King Turgon. Could see the High King of the Noldor himself fall in this battle. It's been just so devastating for everybody. I think the last of the Ash Priests just went down there as well. Now the Trapper is being thrown in. Still some Iron Drakes, though. Might still be a hand to play. Especially if they can, like, be put right here, essentially. Maybe the Kuthalim get moved over a little bit. They'd be able to lay down some pretty serious fire into Círdan's bodyguard there. Might be able to send them running from the field. Mangonel's trying to hit something. I think it needs better spacing, though. It probably has to be pulled back a little bit. Although it's possible that he uses them just as a battering ram to try and, like, smash his way through. That was a good shot for it right there. Just needs to be drawn back so that the projectile has time to detonate. That would be huge. That would be potentially game winning. Donathan and Blung have made it, but they are winded. Let's see if that Mangonel actually manages to get a shot off. It doesn't look like it, though. The Trapper is doing well enough because of the fatigue and the low numbers of the remaining defenders. Donathan Mablung being thrown in alongside the Kuthalim, not a bad idea as well. Kind of have a wrecking ball in there to support the Lord and the relentless Kuthalim as well. Although it might be a better, I think it would be a better option to take the Donath and to swing them over this way, where they're going to get way more damage done. The Arain Efadun, who they're squaring off directly against, don't have a lot of damage. So they're going to take time to kill the remaining units there but they do have massive melee defense pools, and that does negate the advantage of the high attack and the armor piercing, especially of the Donathan Mablanc. So I don't think this side will be able to hold long enough without the support of these Donathan Mablanc, and this could be potentially another game-changing play here on the part of Lord of Belagos. So let's see what happens. Yeah, the Scarhide Trapper is going to get charged down. They're going to break basically immediately. There's nothing left. I think their general is gone. Everything is dead. Orc Mangonel trying to get just one more shot off. Oh, brutal. Yeah, scything its way through those marksmen, but I think they might be running out of steam here. I think the defenders are potentially going to take this. A 1% difference. And now the Mangonel completely out of ammunition. They're going to move forward to take the place of the Scarhide Trappers. Yeah, I think the better play would have been to throw the Donathan Mablanc over here. And then throw the Mangonel over here to support the Kuthalim. Oh no. Iron Drakes have managed to get in though. Let's see if they can get anything done. It's possible they haven't seen it. Oh god, I hope so. Oh please. Yes. Nope, they're having issues. I think they're kind of caught in melee, and it's bugging them out a little bit. Turgon and his one remaining guardsman here, the one remaining retainer of the king, trying to stop these Iron Drakes from completely obliterating this defense here. I don't think it would completely change the outcome of this game, but it would certainly keep it very, very tight in an already very tight game. Clip's just doing his darndest, but he's being harangued by these retainers of the king. What he needs to do is get these guys into a good spot, put them on defensive, and just let them do their thing instead of reissuing orders after orders. Like, that's a mistake I see a lot of people make when they're like desperately trying to get something to be done. Just issue more orders, right? Not always, and especially when it comes to range units, they can be a little bit finicky. Now he's kind of been bullied out of position here. And he just, yeah, can't seem to decide on what it is that he wants to do. Turgon turning around, charging back in. Oh, that might give them the time they need. Nope. They're not even winding up. They're definitely having some issues here. It says there's 4 of them, which means that at least one of them is like stuck back here in combat. Which can certainly bug out your ranged units.
The battle seems to be swinging in
Donathan Mablanc may be swinging things here. I don't know. Marksmen of oh, we have some breaking. The fear potentially from the Donathan Mablanc actually completely sapping the resolve of many of these remaining Philothrum units. And yeah, we saw some Marksmen of Baylor there break, whereas Eglarest may be the next unit on a chopping block. Damn, if only they had that Mangonel shot still left. Like, a shot from artillery would be enough to, I think, break a lot of the remaining numbers here. More Marksmen breaking. These Warriors of Eglarest would certainly flee in the face of that. And in the back, a duel here between Turgon and the remaining Iron Drakes. Turgon's in bad spot here. Getting picked on by that Iron Drake. But one of his guardsmen is going to manage to take down that last remaining Orc, and hopefully he can get over here and save the rest of them. These Iron Drakes doing their best. They want just one good shot. I don't know what they're doing. Yeah, they're really kind of bugged out in this match. Now Turgon's gonna get in there. This guy might have a chance. Let's see if he can do it. One good shot. That's all it's gonna take. Nope. Not gonna have the opportunity. He's gonna get interrupted. I think we're gonna see the end of the Iron Drakes here. King Turgon, the superhero, saving the day. Finally, he was able to be successful in at least one siege battle. And then down here, the Kuthalim and some of the Donna have actually managed to, like, turn the tables here a little bit and get on top of the hill. Some more breaking there. Whereas Eglarest charging in against the Iron Drakes. Turgon going to fell the last Iron Drake and put him into the ground, and now that danger has been abated. And the remains of the Doriathrim putting up heroic resistance here. but I don't think it's going to be enough to carry the day. The numbers of the defenders, while greatly reduced to just a handful of leaves, are still, I think, too great for the remaining units to overcome. But damn, what a close game. What a close-ass game. That's like a 50... I think there's like 55 defenders here still remaining. King Turgon squaring off, exhausted from all of his efforts here against one of the Donath guardsmen. He's going to have a bad time. He's not able to put some damage on him. Oh, he manages to get behind him, sort of dancing around each other. He's going to take that guy down. What a maneuver. He's going to muscle his way into the fray, feeling confident, possibly seeking out Thingol himself if he's still here. He is indeed. They're not too far from each other. See him in that top left corner.
If we continue like this, we will smash the enemy.
Turgon now pulling out. He's going to try and get around here and fight Thingol himself if at all he can. The Grey Lord of the Wood has no idea what's coming for him. And there he goes. Trying to get in there. Thingol doing his best. Getting boxed around a little bit. Turgon, I think, coming face to face with another guardsman of the Donath and Mablung. Let's see what happens to old Turgon here. Thingol, I think we know his fate. But I want to know what happens with this guy. Fighting over the corpse of, like, Gothmog, the High Captain of Angband. The High King of the Noldor, dueling with one of these Donath and Mablung. See if he's able to do anything here. He's just hammering him back, that exhausted lord, and just... Oh, there goes Thingol. And there goes Turgon. Devastating. The final count here is going to be 100% to 99. There's like nothing left here from the defenders. Very, very well played to everybody who was in this. I really think that this was kind of the quintessential Silmarillion game. There were so many of the mechanics that I've talked about in videos that were on display. The use of fire weapons, for example, the way that Angband in particular can overcome some difficult situations with some good tactics, and the use of their monsters and their tricksy traps as well. And everyone just did really, really well in this game. Frodor Baggins, who's even like a new player, like knows how to... obviously knows how to play Medieval 2, so it's a real pleasure to watch. Well, let's take a look here at some of the casualties inflicted. Nothing like particularly runaway like the Marksmen did well, of course they did. The Nobles did reasonably well. One of them only got 173 though. The Around Kirlian had obviously very different fates, you know, one of them getting another 70 kills over the other. Orion Ephidum getting just a small amount of kills, but they just held everything together, both by like bogging down the Donath and Mablung, but also just keeping them in place and using their Inspire ability to keep the rest of the army together. Because if they didn't have that, we're already seeing breaking. We could have seen like the Donath and Mablung use their fear to great effect, and the exhausted troops begin to run and flee, and that would have been an attacker victory right there. So very, very close. The first time I think I actually got to shoot Gondolin off on the channel too, so I was real excited about that. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. My name is Jordan, also known as JMonster if you're just joining us for the first time. Welcome, and I'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.